what is justice? What is a good society? What is the meaning of a good life? What civic virtues should we seek to cultivate? So if we care about bringing about justice and the common good, then we're kind of propelled into a dialogue about what justice and the good life really are. Because, of course, there are, and have always been, competing ideas about the meaning of justice and the common good. That's why the great philosophers of the past, Plato, Confucius, Aristotle, and so on, they had different ideas. And those who followed in the Western tradition, including John Locke and John Stuart Mill and Kant and Hegel and Marx, they all had different conceptions of the meaning of justice and questions of the good life and of civic virtue. If they disagreed, it's not surprising that we disagree. And yet, what's interesting is we have the sense that those arguments, though they seem impossible finally to resolve, they keep going. And they keep attracting our attention. And we want, in each generation, to figure out for ourselves what it means to seek a just society, what it means to aspire to the common good.
So if we were in the stage, I mean, the great soul, the Kant, Marx, they're all alive, actually.
Yes.
Interact with each student, with you.
Well, that's the idea. That's the fundamental idea, that these great philosophers are not just episodes in the history of ideas. They're not just museum pieces. They are episodes in arguments in which we are still engaged today. So that if I do my job well in teaching philosophy to this generation of students, they will feel as if they are in conversation with Plato and Aristotle and Kant. Because philosophy is a tradition of thought and argument that builds upon and refers always to the past.
You think why? Public philosophy is so important for the society.
Public philosophy is an attempt to find meaning together that is not purely technocratic, not purely practical, not only about economic questions, but about larger questions too. It's because we've been so preoccupied with GDP, with markets, with economic growth, and with technology. And it creates a moral vacuum. And unless it's filled with deliberation about public questions, it will be filled by narrow, intolerant, dangerous ideologies. And that's my worry. Let me give here one recent example of this. During the pandemic, in many ways, the pandemic highlighted inequalities that existed before the pandemic. A great many of us had the luxury of being able to work from home during the pandemic, to teach from home, to work from home, to write from home. Delivery workers, grocery store clerks, warehouse workers, truck drivers, nursing assistants, home health care providers, child care workers. Now, these are not the best paid or the most honored workers in our societies. But for a moment during the pandemic, we called them essential workers. We applauded them at the end of the day. We put up signs thanking them. This could have been a moment for a broader public debate about how to bring their pay and recognition into better alignment with the importance of the contributions they make. But it didn't happen. The pandemic receded. We never really had that moment. And now we've gone back to business as usual.
So you think meritocracy is part of reason?
And I think the answer to that question is connected to the widening inequalities of recent decades, and also to the changing attitudes towards success that have accompanied the widening inequalities. Over the past half century, really, those who've landed on top have come increasingly to believe that their success is their own doing, the measure of their merit, and that they therefore deserve the bounty that the market bestows upon them. And by implication, that those who struggle, those left behind, must deserve their fate as well. It produces a kind of hubris among the winners and humiliation among the losers. It teaches the winners, if I believe that I achieved whatever I achieved through my own efforts, through my own doing, because everything was fair, then I'm likely to inhale too deeply of my own success, to forget the luck and good fortune that helped me on my way, to forget my indebtedness to those who make my achievements possible. And so this is what I call the tyranny of merit. But from 2016, it became elevated with the presidency of Donald Trump. We've struggled more directly and more conspicuously, more frontally with the dark side, finding public expression.
On the stage now.
On the stage, public expression, rather than kept at the margins and at the periphery. And finding a voice in the media, and in social media especially. And now in a presidential campaign that will be a rematch of the one from last time. We've seen as a backlash against elites, especially against well-educated elites, professional elites. Donald Trump has been very effective at tapping into the grievances of people who feel they've been left behind and looked down upon.
Humiliation.
The politics of humiliation. And it's this sense of humiliation, I think, that opened the way for the politics of grievance that Donald Trump has been able to exploit. In the United States today, and in many parts of the world, is a politics of anger, resentment, and grievance without mutual recognition, without recognizing the value of the contributions that people make from different walks of life. We will not really begin to address the resentments that now afflict our politics and have accentuated some of the darkest strands in social life.
So could you imagine, maybe in the coming years, everyone has said here to emigrate into the metaverse.
Yeah.
What should philosophy do, thinker do in that new era?
Take the goggles off.
Yeah.
That's what philosophy should do, take the goggles off.
So
it would be the mission of philosophy in a metaverse, if it ever came to be, would be to try to take or persuade people to take those goggles off, to imagine a world in which the line between what's virtual and what's real blurs to the point of vanishing. And here's the question: would such a world be recognizable as a human world? A world in which we had lost where we no longer cared even to ask the question, how to locate the line between the virtual and the real. And I think the deepest threat in human terms posed by the age of AI is that we will confuse virtual community and connection with the real thing. And that would represent a great loss.
How to fight with the trend or deal with the trend? It seems unstoppable.
You think it seems unstoppable?
It seems, yeah. I'm
and
not sure.
Why? Well, it's worth asking, in figuring out how to stop it, it's worth asking why it seems unstoppable. Why do you think?
Because too less true debate and, discussion about it. Most people just follow the trend.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I could feel and believe the connection I have through my phone, scrolling and swiping and texting and posting, that connection to people half a world away is the same as valuable as my personal connections to family, friends, neighbors, classmates.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I don't know.
Why would that represent a loss, I guess is what I'm asking. Why would that represent a loss?
I'm curious about you because, my phone.
Yeah.
It's the most intimate things we have. We touch
intimate.
Very intimate.
Right.
You spend more time with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even through the social media, you talk with so many people. I think sometimes, even most time, because from live different places, we through it, but still feel kind of very intimate.
Yeah.
The similar with me.
Intimate.
Face to face.
Right.
So it's a new community. But I'm not so sure about it's less important than the more concrete communities before or the similar. I'm so confused about it. So how to understand it, the change?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you this question. Since we're talking about intimacy. Intimacy is an important aspect of this.
Yeah.
There are now AI-equipped devices, little robots, that you can buy. Let's say you have an aged parent or grandparent who's living alone, maybe in a nursing home, and who's lonely. And you visit them from time to time, but you can't be there every day. You can buy one of these robotic companions, and the robotic companion will carry on a conversation with your loved one, your grandmother, let's say. And let's suppose that your grandmother comes to regard that robotic AI-driven companion as a friend, as an actual friend, sharing intimacies, asking advice. And suppose that this relieves the loneliness of your grandmother and makes her happier. She considers this her friend. Would that bother you, or would you welcome that?
Welcome.
You would welcome it?
It doesn't bother me. Yeah.
It doesn't bother you at all?
Maybe not at all. Maybe a little, but I accept it.
You would accept it? But what's the little that bothers?
Maybe just because it's a new thing and needs some time and space to understand it, accept it.
But if you are this goes back to what we were discussing about the virtual and the actual and the real. Now your grandmother no longer recognizes, we're assuming, the difference between a robotic friend and an actual friend. That doesn't bother you. Do you think there's a loss?
I think the new friend, the toy, is friend of her. Because some books are for friends, even it's just papers.
Books.
Yeah.
So if the grandmother or if you or I were absorbed in a book.
Yeah, even we see some old books, it's like friends, yeah. It's spent many, maybe childhood years with you.
And, well, I agree that a book can be a friend and a source of, I would say, genuine companionship. But does it matter that when I'm reading a book and absorbed in a book, I'm engaged in a kind of exchange with, a kind of dialogue with the human author of that book? Whereas when your grandmother is spending her day conversing with the robot, she isn't.
We talk about Socrates, Plato, even it's 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Still can be your friend.
Yes.
So why not the toy?
Why not the toy?
Yeah, why not?
Because it's a machine.
Yeah.
Because
But yeah,
can it engage in dialogue? We've been talking a lot about dialogue.
yeah.
Or put it this way, take a simple example, when we've...
Maybe the toy speak like Socrates. So many information about Socrates.
Right.
Thoughts.
Right.
In the toy.
Like a chatbot.
Yeah,
A Socratic chatbot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can imagine Socrates from the books, from his dialogue.
Yeah.
From the books.
Yes.
Maybe she can imagine something similar from the toy.
Yes.
The toy is like different books. Because the books is much more sophisticated than we think. Even a book, it's more different layers. Maybe we just can touch it, maybe several layers, but more layers we still can't touch.
Maybe. If the toy becomes a sophisticated chatbot that is programmed on Socrates or Dostoevsky.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Suppose your grandmother passes away, but she has left all of her digital data, all of her emails, all of her social media, recording of her experiences, and created a digital avatar using machine learning so that you're mourning the loss of your loved one, but you can still carry on conversations with her, and so can your children, and so can their children with their great-great-grandmother, and ask her advice, can introduce her to a new boyfriend or girlfriend, ask her opinion. Now, in principle, machine learning, AI-generated chatbots, as they become perfected, could provide a kind of virtual immortality, in which case the line that's being blurred is not only between the virtual and the actual, but between living and not living. What about that? Would you want to speak to the virtual digital avatar of your great-grandmother?
Maybe I will, I guess. I would. Because because in those days we see picture of them.
Yeah?
Their letters.
Photo. Read their letters and remember them.
Yeah, it's still kind of dialogue with the photo, with the letters.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a kind of dialogue.
Yeah, it's become a new complicated and a more rich photo and letters. Yeah.
So so virtual immortality, you would welcome virtual immortality.
I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I think I will. It's like maybe still about books, the bookshelf.
Yeah.
Around your room, you
Yeah.
can see different names.
Yeah.
Maybe the AI, the robot, the virtual reality. Maybe it's kind of new thing of like books. It's grandma, grandparents, yeah, friends. But
In that case, would we no longer grieve or feel sad when someone dies, a loved one dies?
sure, we have.
But why? If we can continue to know them and speak to them and be with them, then why should we even grieve their passing?
But I think we still can see the very thin line of the different part. That's still a line.
The thin line.
Yeah, I think. I don't know. I think.
And if we no longer could even find the line, would that be better? Or worse?
No, I don't think so.
It wouldn't be better.
I don't think so.
Because?
If we human being can't feel lost, maybe part of us will disappear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But some new part will emerge.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But loss is an interesting aspect of humanity. Your intuition that loss is somehow essential to being human.
You're defined by loss, yes, yeah.
By loss, which is connected to memory. Maybe this is another way of describing what would be lost if the line between the virtual and the real were altogether blurred. Well, so what can we do?
So, what's your choice? The same question. What's your choice?
I think there would be a loss.
Will you accept it? I mean,
But would I go to speak to the virtual avatar of
Yeah.
my grandmother? Maybe as a curiosity to see how the machine worked, but not thinking that this was being in the presence of my grandmother. In fact, the idea of human presence and why it matters is one of the most important questions posed by new technologies and AI. It's another way of asking the questions we've been discussing just now. What is there about human presence that matters? I've thought about this in connection with teaching because, as you know, we did an experiment some years ago and filmed and put the justice class online.
yeah.
And we did it as an experiment. We did it to show that higher education should be a public resource, not just a private privilege. We had no idea what would come of it. We certainly didn't imagine that tens of millions of people would want to watch it, which is what happened, to watch lectures about philosophy. But it did raise the question then about what am I doing here in Sanders Theater at Harvard? If people can watch online, is there a difference between attending a class or a discussion or a dialogue virtually, online, and in person? And now it may depend on the subject. Some of my colleagues have made attendance at their lectures optional if they have video recorded ones. They say, well, you can watch it and get the content. You can learn the information from the lecture sitting at home in your pajamas in bed, as well as sitting in the classroom. I don't see it that way, at least for my subject, because being here sitting here and listening and engaging and wondering and puzzling and laughing and responding, I see that as something that is very difficult to replicate.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Digitally. And yet, I'm interested in doing more and more experiments to see if we can create platforms for public discourse and dialogue, including global public discourse. I think we should explore that, in part because if we don't do it deliberately, then this entire technological apparatus and social media will simply be what we have today, which is a highly polarizing, mind-numbing, commercially driven form of communication that takes us further and further away from a healthy civic life. So I want to do experiments to create platforms for global discussion using the internet, using new technologies. But I don't think it will ever be possible fully to replace the human presence that learning at its best and dialogue at its best requires. But do you think that's just a traditional old-fashioned view, maybe?
I agree. I totally
you agree with that?
But but it's paradox because you mentioned in a classroom, in a theater.
Yeah.
You mentioned in one interview said in Beijing, a taxi driver told you he watched your video.
He told a colleague of mine.
Yeah. You know, maybe for the Beijing taxi driver, for that moment, even very long distance from here, but he feel so intimate with your point of view, maybe more than the student here. Maybe. Yeah.
Well, this was a thrilling, when I heard this story, that a Beijing taxi driver had been watching my lectures on justice. And he said his family was watching with him. This, for me, this single story was a reward, one of the greatest rewards I've experienced since we did this project. And so I think it's important to use technology to open access and to promote discussion and learning and mutual learning, and to try to go further to create back and forth dialogue, not just diffusing material, but enabling people to discuss across great distances. And yet, if that were all there was to human connection, then I think we would lose something. I think we would lose something. In fact, I would go further. I think part of what makes watching justice online compelling for that taxi driver in Beijing or anyone else is that what they are watching is not just me standing giving a lecture. They are watching actual engagement in person. And that's part of what makes it compelling.
Yeah,
I
you're
think.
right. You're quite right. Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. Quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah.